Well, hello out there in real country. You're listening to WMOQ 92.3 on your FM dial. It is high noon, and that, of course, means that it is time for the Marc McMain Show. I'm Bob Furr, filling in for Marc. You know, Chastity, I feared my last 2 Tuesdays ago might be my last Tuesday. I had to miss last Tuesday.
Yes.
Shout out to Mitchell Swan for filling in for me.
Yes.
Listened to you guys on the radio as I was making the trip. But apparently reports of it being my last Tuesday were greatly exaggerated. Congratulations to Marc McMain, who won the primary for the District 46 Senate seat. But he didn't win enough, apparently.
That's right.
So as the rules go, he's going to be in a runoff. And so my run-on Tuesdays will continue for a while.
I
so,
like that.
you know,
Hey,
so.
that was fancy.
Thank you. So it's great to be here. Always great to be here with you, Chastity. Great to see you again. So
Thank you.
how was your Memorial Day? What did you do
It
to
was
observe
wonderful.
the day?
I did a lot of remembering and knowing that we actually celebrate this season for our veterans, and so a lot of reflecting, and of course, you know, the family cookouts and all that good stuff too. So, and it was a 3-day extra weekend, so it was nice and relaxing. How about you?
So I was in the best place you can be for Memorial Day, which is Madison, of
Yes,
course, right?
beautiful.
Because the big Ride for America comes there. You know, I always equate Memorial Day kind of to Easter a little bit, because they're both about a sacrifice that was made for the lives that we live now. And they've both been a little bit hijacked. Memorial Day by cookouts and beach trips, and Easter by the Easter Bunny. I guess the difference is I don't think it's okay to say Happy Memorial Day, but I do think it's okay to say Happy Easter because of the good news and the gift that we all got on Easter. So I think the happy fits. But like I said, great place to be in Madison. For the Memorial Day Ride for America. They all rolled into town with all their bikes, and I'm excited to talk to Stan. Hopefully next year I'm going to be able to take the trolley and bring some veterans along for the ride, which would be really cool. But they came in and did a great ceremony, and it was a reminder of my childhood. You know, the town I grew up in, we always had a Memorial Day parade, and then they would have a big ceremony at the VFW, and it was nice to be back in a town, you know, that puts the memorial, not the happy, in
Right.
Memorial Day.
Absolutely.
And that was a great place to be.
Yes. And I actually seen the ride myself. So our family stood on 78. We were all wearing our patriotic colors, holding our flags, as the bikers were going to Madison to come see you.
Yeah,
So,
it's really awesome how people turn out. I heard Stan getting a little bit choked up talking about it on the radio
Yes, I
last
know.
week in terms of just the outpouring of support that they get. So, hey, big shout out to Morgan County High School's AA baseball team. Won the state championship with a sweep over Pierce County.
Congratulations.
Muscled through some delays with some rain and such like that. That's the very first baseball title for Morgan County. It is, however, their 24th title overall for state championships in Morgan County. Pretty impressive. And third this year.
Wow.
They've won volleyball, basketball, and now baseball. So shout out to the Bulldogs of Morgan County. Got to go to their graduation ceremony last week. My niece graduated, and it was really cool. Great. They did a great job with the ceremony. They had all the students come in and kind of wind through the bleachers, and so they walked in, and so they're basically all over. They're like in the aisles and walking around you. It was just a really great, really kind of unique, cool ceremony that they did there. So. Hey, so some upcoming events. So we just completed 2 big ones in Madison. The Tour of Homes was a big success last weekend. And then the Ride for America we just talked about. Coming up is Summer Nights in Town Park, select Thursdays in June and July. These are free events, concerts, special events. So you can go to Town Park, bring your lawn chair, your cooler, hang out, have a good time. For more information on that, you can go to madisonga.com/Summer Nights. And then, of course, coming up on July 3rd, the big Independence Day Patriotic Concert and Picnic at the Cultural Center. There's always one of our city councilmen dresses up as Uncle Sam, and I mean, he looks great. Like, he really looks like Uncle Sam. And hopefully I'll be getting to do trolley rides for the kids again like I did last year. For more information on that concert, you can go to mmcc-arts.org. And then, of course, on July 4th, 2 big things happening in Madison. They have the Daughters of the American Revolution, the Henry Walton chapter, are putting on a We the People event where people are going to be reading the Declaration of Independence. That's what they did, by the way, Chastity, after the Declaration of Independence was signed and it got distributed in public places throughout the colonies. They read the Declaration. It's not like it's not like it was on the evening news, right? So people would go to like Faneuil Hall in Boston and people read it from there. So they're going to kind of replicate what happened 250 years ago with reading the Declaration of Independence. And there's going to be different readers of all ages doing that. And then the next night, on July 4th, same day, July 4th, have the big fireworks in Madison. Traditionally, they've always been on July 3rd. This year, they're putting them on July 4th. And that's put on by the Madison Fire Department. And then starting in July, you've got the weekend Firefly Festivals in Town Park. On the 24th, there's one for kids. You bring your kids there, they have a good time. And then the next night, Saturday the 25th, is a date night. Great night out in Town Park at the Firefly Festival. So you can get information on that at madisonga.com/Firefly. So lots going on coming up as we move into the summer here in Madison.
Special. So especially summertime and fireflies. It just goes together so perfect.
It does. Like, I remember when we had that trip, Wagons West, we were talking about, we used to go to Hershey, Pennsylvania, and I just remember the fireflies being so numerous, and they're such a cool,
so fun.
Cool summer
and you
thing.
don't see them that often anymore. So
yeah, they're not as
unless
many
you're
as
more
there were.
Deeper into the woods.
Yeah, mosquitoes I'd like to see less of.
Right,
That's
exactly.
You're listening to the Marc McMain Show. Bob Furr filling in for Mark on Tuesdays, WMOQ. Real Country 92.3 on your FM dial. So, Chastity, my guest today, I feel like I've known him my whole life because, as you and I were talking, I had a pretty unique experience last week. As you know, I spent 5 days driving a trolley across the United States. Now, I have to ask you, do you know anybody else who has driven a trolley across the United States?
No, not at all.
Yeah,
and I just think to myself, a trolley?
Yeah,
going across the country, so
I feel like you get to be a certain age, and you're like, man, I just don't know if there's any new experiences left for me. Things I'm never gonna, Well, guess what? I found one last week, and it was just a really interesting trip. The people I encountered along the way, and from what people I encountered along the way asked me, and then the questions I got when I got back, and then as you and I discussed, this might be something that people would be interested in hearing about. And so today, you and I are just going to talk about it. I'm going to share what that trip was like and what it was like to drive a trolley across the United States.
You kind of wonder, why a trolley? So Bob's going to fill us all in on that. So excited.
So one of the most common questions that I get, Chastity, is, where do you find a trolley? How do you get a trolley?
Right.
And I think I'm going to start with that. So, and you know me with my history. Let's go to the origin of trolleys. I'm going to give you a trivia question here.
Okay.
So, do you know what trolleys and a Major League Baseball team have in common?
Transportation?
No. You get a lot. So here, it's a very specific thing. So the very first streetcar or trolley in the United States operated in Manhattan in New York City. And it was drawn by horses, and eventually it became steam-powered, and then they became electrical-powered. And once trolleys were powered by electricity, they exploded in this country. In fact, at their peak around the turn of the century, there were about 17,000 cities and communities that were operating trolley or streetcar systems as their primary intercity transportation. Not surprisingly, New York City had one of the most extensive systems, particularly in the borough of Brooklyn, where there were so many trolley lines that fans of the local baseball team, creatively named at the time the Brooklyn baseball team, were given the nickname Trolley Dodgers because of all the trolleys they had to dodge to get to the ballpark to see the games. And so the Brooklyn baseball team adopted the name Trolley Dodgers. In 1939, they became officially the Brooklyn Dodgers, who, of course, in 1957 moved to Los Angeles as the Los Angeles Dodgers.
Wow.
So a little baseball trolley
thank
history
you
for you. Now, eventually these trolley systems were replaced by buses as they became more economical, except in San Francisco, of course, they maintained that cable car system out there, and maybe some definition.
Is that the same, though, a cable car and a trolley?
I'm glad you asked, because let's get some definitions out here. So a cable car runs on rails and is powered by a cable underneath the street. That's a cable car. They're designed for places like San Francisco where there are hills and such like that. And the trolley actually goes by grabbing onto the cable and, being pulled up or down, going down the hill.
Interesting.
The cable car does, rather. So streetcars run on rails, and are powered by electricity from an overhead line called a trolley pole, which is why in this country streetcar and trolley are pretty much used interchangeably. Okay? Then you have a trolley bus. Now, a trolley bus runs on that same electricity from the trolley pole, but it runs on wheels. It runs on tires, not on rails. And then you have what I have, which is really a bus made to look like a trolley, but we don't tell Maddie that because she's very sensitive about it. But it's really just a Ford F-53 chassis with a V10 engine. It's the same kind of thing they put on motorhomes, but it's really just it's a bus. It's a bus that's made to look like a trolley.
It's so fun.
Yeah, now I'll tell you this, you do not want to go, if you go over to Europe and you say, hey, where do I catch the trolley? They're going to look at you funny because to them a trolley is what we would call a shopping cart. They call trolleys trams. So.
Interesting. Thank you for that little note.
There you go. So the trolleys that I've got and the modern trolley tours you see around, they actually started in Key West in the 1970s. Key West was kind of down and out. A big Air Force base had left and the city was in decline. And they started this thing called the Conch Tour train, where they took people around in this like a little bit amusement park train that drove on the streets. Well, along comes this guy named Chris Belland. And Chris Belland wants to compete with this, and he starts the Conch Town Trolley. And this was really just, they were cut down bread trucks that they built with plywood, and they were ridiculous looking things. And he started competing against the Conch Tour train. Well, the Conch Tour train sued them because the name Conch Tour Trolley was too similar to Conch Tour train. And so he changed the name of his company to Old Town Trolley, which you may have heard of because Old Town Trolley is pretty big. So he started looking for the right vehicle, and in 1979 he saw a replica trolley in the Orange Bowl parade, and from the old kinds of streetcars that we were just talking about. And now in the 50s and 60s, what was going on in this country was this: they were tearing down all these old historic districts and building these big, modern-looking, massive buildings. So like a great example of this is, if you've ever been to Boston, the Boston Federal Building is this big, huge concrete monstrosity in the middle of historic old north end of Boston. But then in the late 60s and early 70s, they went in the other direction. People started recognizing the value of these historic downtown areas, and they started to renovate them, and there was this wave of interest in historic districts and areas and neighborhoods and cities, and Old Town Trolley, Chris Belland, rode that wave. And so he opened his second trolley. So the first Old Town Trolley was in Key West, and he rode that wave, opening a second trolley up in Boston. And he pioneered what they call the hop-on, hop-off trolley, where you could go around and get on as you want. You can go. We can't do that, unfortunately, because there's nothing to get off for in Madison. But now those trolleys operate in Charleston, San Antonio, San Diego, Savannah, Washington, D.C. And now cities have gotten into the act. And, you know, a lot of cities have their own trolleys. Both my trolleys come from former city operations. And so there were a bunch of manufacturers that were putting together these trolleys. Molly Trolley, Chance Company in Kansas, which made amusement park rides, Freightliner that made trucks, got into it. They all started making trolleys. And then in the 1990s, you got cities getting into it with actual streetcar lines, like they have mostly for tourists, right? So you have actual streetcar lines in San Francisco and in New Orleans. And so that's kind of how things have come along. Sure. And so when we come back from the commercial break, I'm going to answer the question that I'm asked probably more than any other question, which is, where does one find a trolley and how does one get a trolley? So you're listening to the Marc McMain Show. Bob for filling in for Mark on Tuesdays. WMOQ 92.3 on your FM dial. We'll be right back with some trolley talk after these commercials.
I chuckled at a cartoon that showed a news conference by a United States Senator who announced that he was divorcing his family so he could spend more time with politics. We may laugh, but the truth is many people make that statement every day. Maybe not with words, but with their actions. In fact, if a politician retires from his work to spend more time with his family, it becomes the lead story, met with cynicism on the evening news, while the one who rejects his family advancing his career is commonplace. God tells us we should work hard to the glory of God. But he has clearly shown that we must have priorities. A relationship with God first, and family follows that. What does your focus tell you about your priorities? The Bible says that we have brought nothing into this world and we can take nothing out of it. It's good to focus on the things that last, like putting God first, and then family, and then people all around us that God loves. This is Bryant Wright, speaking right from my heart.
Visit rightfromtheheart.org and click television to watch our TV spots.
I'm Miranda, founder of the Humane Society of Walton County. We're a community-funded no-kill shelter for homeless dogs and cats. On May 30th, we're raffling off a brand new 2024 Jeep Wrangler or $40,000 in cash. Tickets start at $30 each, with only 5,000 being sold. To purchase your tickets, visit humanewalton.org. You don't want to miss this chance to win a brand new 2024 Jeep Wrangler or $40,000 in cash, all benefiting the Humane Society of Walton County.
The Madison Trolley Company is Morgan County's newest 5-star attraction. We offer historic Madison tours year-round, a haunted history experience in the fall, and our Madison Lights Christmas Tour and Mary Maddie Express Adventure for kids have become new holiday traditions. Our private charters add vintage charm to weddings and special occasions aboard a historic trolley by day, party trolley by night. Find us on the Madison Town Square or get on board by visiting madisontrolley.com or calling us at 706-997-1800.
Welcome back, Real Country. You're listening to the Marc McMain Show on 92.3. This is Bob Furr filling in for Marc on Tuesdays. We've been talking about the history of trolleys, and now we're going to get into the experience of buying a trolley and driving it across the country. So, the question I was saying before the break, I get asked very often, is how does one go about buying a trolley?
Absolutely. And what surprises you most about the buying process?
Yeah, I think what surprised me the most about the buying process was how hard it is to buy a trolley. So it's a really interesting. So here's the deal. So back in February 2026, the idea came to being, as I said before, it was kind of a joke. My sister-in-law, said, "Hey, do you ever think growing up in upstate New York you'd end up, Madison, Georgia? What are you going to do now?" And I made a joke about maybe I'll start one of those historic trolleys. Right? That's how it all started. So the first thing I did is went before the city, wanted to make sure that they were down with it, and they were very enthusiastic. And so, now the next thing is I got to find a trolley. So I turned to Google. And very quickly, I learned there's really only two companies that are still making trolleys. One company's called Molly Trolley, and the other is a company called Hometown Trolley. And all the other businesses, it seems like, went out of business or stopped making them after COVID. It seemed to be a big hit on the trolley business. The Molly trolleys, they kind of look like buses to me. They're not really cute. They don't have that. They're like funny looking buses. Nothing against them if you own a Molly trolley out there. And my understanding is it's a family business, and the kids didn't really want to carry on the business, so it just didn't seem like a good long-term play. Hometown, on the other hand, was very clear was the way to go. They have a great look. They're an impressive company. Unfortunately, what I quickly learned was I'm apparently not the only one with that opinion. So I call Hometown Trolley. They're in Cranford, Wisconsin, which is 2 hours northwest of Green Bay, so up in a little town in Cranford, Wisconsin. And the guy gets on the phone with me, and he just kind of chuckles. He's like, "Yeah, we'd love to sell you a trolley. It's a 16-month lead time." So this would have meant that the business I'm trying to start, in 2025 doesn't get started till 2026, And so I'm like, okay, that's not going to work. And then plus you have the problem with that lead time. You got to lay out all that capital when you're not making any revenue and stuff like that. So that's when I got introduced to the seedy underbelly of the used trolley market, right? And so there's all these resellers. The biggest is probably a company called Specialty Vehicles, and then another company called Trolley Brokers. And Specialty Vehicles, man, that was a bad experience because what they do is, and really they all do this, they put trolleys online. So you do a Google search, hey, I'm looking for a hometown villager trolley. They all pop up, and then when you go to the website, they were sold 2 years ago. And they keep them on the site so that you go to the site to see the other trolleys that they have there. And then with them in particular, I finally did find two trolleys, and I was like, yeah, I'd like to go ahead and buy one. And they're like, well, we have this other customer who's willing to buy two. And I'm finally like, look, everybody tells me I need new trolleys. Fine, I'm going to buy both trolleys. I'll take them both. And they're like, well, we're kind of under contract with this city in California. I'm like, hello?
Wow.
You know what I mean? Like, it just kind of, so they were just playing me along in case the deal with the city fell through. So I'm like, okay, I'm done with you. Trolley Brokers was great. Really nice lady, the daughter of the founder, but, I kind of felt like she was riding into the sunset as well. So I just start calling these different people that deal in reselling vehicles like limousines and trolleys, and I end up talking to a guy who knew a guy who knew a guy.
Yes.
And the guy had bought a smaller trolley, Maddie, that I have today, but then he immediately found in an auction 3 larger trolleys, and he does weddings up in like Cape Cod, Newport, Rhode Island area, and so he wants the bigger trolleys, and so now he had this trolley he didn't really need, and through this guy I met Limousine Network Sales, Giulio Vescovi out in California. Shout out to Giulio. He connected me, and I was able to buy Maddie, which turned out to be a perfect trolley. And then he's been looking ever since, right? So Maddie was, what I've learned is that it looks like cities keep trolleys for about 12 years until they run them up to maybe about 100,000 miles or close to it, and then they put them on auction. So that was kind of the story with Maddie. So Julio's looking for me all this time trying to find something, and then finally he gives me a call, and he's like, I've got the perfect trolley. And this guy's great. Like, he's a very deep Christian man, a lot of faith, like God get messages on the trip across the country that he's praying for me every day, that sort of thing. I think he was praying for me because he'd never had anybody drive a trolley back before across the country. But this one was really perfect. He's like, this is exactly what you're looking for. And it was a 2014. It's just like Maddie, but it's a little bit bigger. It sits a little bit higher because it's got a longer wheelbase, and it's got a balcony on the back of it. So it's going to be perfect for weddings.
Yes.
So Maddie will stay our tour trolley, and the other trolley is going to be our trolley that we use for weddings and such like that. And it only has 37,000 miles on it, and it is in fantastic condition, so it really worked out great. So, now I just got to buy it and get it here from California.
Yeah.
You're listening to Marc. Go ahead.
Sorry. So have you ever thought during this process, like, what have I gotten myself into?
Have I ever not thought that? Like when I brought the trolley back the other night, my kids are there, and my daughter's just like, how did we end up owning 2 trolleys? Exactly. It's not like we just it was weird enough when we had 1 trolley. Now we have 2 trolleys,
right.
So yeah, it's been nothing but a great experience. Sure. But there are those days when it's just like, trying to get the air conditioner fixed and not being able to do it. I've been trying forever to get the audio-visual system in. It's tough when you're working, when you can't rely on people that you're trying to get stuff done, or just being in this area, there's not a lot of trolleys running around, right? Yeah. And so, you got to find people who actually know how to work. Like the air conditioner system is one that people around here don't have a lot of experience working with, and so hopefully Bove's Wrecker is going to help me out with that. I'm taking the trolley there tomorrow to see if they can figure it out. So it's stuff like that. It's all the things, the DOT requirements. But no, it's been nothing but great. I mean, I just really enjoy it, and it's been a lot of fun doing that. So now I got to get this thing back from California, which, by the way, second time now I've bought a trolley sight unseen, right? You know what I mean? Like, I love it. Right? Like, I go to the produce department and I want to handle every apple before I buy it, and I'm, making big purchases, right? Yes. So this one I went out there with the check in my pocket just to make sure, but as soon as I saw it. Now, the thing is with the flatbed market, meaning the trucks that carry these things back across the country, because of gas prices, that market is incredibly volatile. Sure. And the guy was telling me, people will just not show up, or they will say it was going to be $4,000 and now it's $9,000, and it just seemed like it was. And I needed to get that back here because if it was in as good a shape as he said, there was an opportunity to get that right into service. Like I'm hoping to have this thing up and running by June, to start to do some weddings I've got coming up, and that's been a problem because I've had to turn away some weddings because they just had more people to move than I could move with 1 trolley. And then, I think it's on June 6th, I have a 5 deep waiting list for people looking for the trolley on that weekend. So awesome. I don't know that I'll get Maddie into service or Dolly into that service. By the way, her name is Dolly.
Okay.
She's named for Dolly Madison, and Dolly spelled her name Dolley. So Dolly the trolley seemed like a good fit.
It. So cute.
Yeah. So somewhere along the line, the idea popped into my head. Well, why don't I just go out there and drive it? And, I figure it's a great way for me to get to know the vehicle. And originally, my plan was to make the trip with my son. My son loves the wilderness. He loves, I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up being a national park ranger. He loves the outdoors, loves the West. And I'm like, hey, you know what? We'll fly out there. We'll drive the trolley back through like Bryce and Zion and the Grand Canyon and Durango, and we'll see all these cool things. And then the guy I bought the trolley from was like, so you didn't plan on bringing the transmission back with you then? And the thing is, these things are not made for that, right? They're made for driving around the city. They only have a 5-speed transmission, and so I had to cut out that. It had to be just get straight across the country. But I was intending to see what I could. See along the way, but I wasn't going to be able to make it out of Utah. So the plan then became, I'm going to drive it straight back across I-40. So I-40 runs from Barstow, California, all the way to Wilmington, Delaware. And then I'm thinking, well, maybe I hire somebody to drive it for me. But then after talking to the guys about, you really have to, I think it was the first time I really felt like a professional driver, because I was really having to watch the RPMs and the temperature on the engine. I'm driving through deserts. I got an early morning drive to get through the deserts and the mountains, typically going up some of those mountains and getting out of California, first of all, you had to get out of the freeway. And funny story about this. So I pull out of the place with the trolley, and right away I'm in Los Angeles freeway traffic, 75 lanes across, and everybody driving like a lunatic. And I'm driving this trolley that I now have, 12 minutes of experience in. And I'm like, I was a little stressed out, so I was trying to get the radio working, but I couldn't really mess with the radio because I was driving. And the only thing I could get on the radio was the pre-recorded message from the city where I bought the trolley, Santa Maria, California. And this guy and this girl talking, well, Santa Maria has outstanding hiking trails. Oh, I bet they tell you to take a hike. So I'm listening to that for 15 minutes until finally I'll take the silence instead. But then it started a long climb, right? Then I'm up into the mountains, and I'm getting down to like 35 miles an hour to keep those RPMs. And then you get to have the flashers on because people are whizzing by you. And, it's interesting. I will tell you that I've heard a lot about Amazon, the big trucks, and that Amazon is kind of I wouldn't say skirting the rules, but they subcontract to drivers, that aren't necessarily the best drivers type of thing. And I have to tell you, every bad encounter I had with a truck, maybe coming too close to me or going too fast, was an Amazon truck for sure. But I'm sure they were bringing things to my house, so I can't complain too much. So the plan was we're just going to drive it straight across this road I-40. And I decided I was going to do it myself. And I was going to do it myself because, number one, I own the trolley. And so, I know that I'm going to be very careful about that transmission and the temperature. I know I'm going to baby this thing and keep it safe. But also, a couple weeks ago, we were in here talking about Wagons West and that trip we took around the country. I've been back to pretty much every place we went on Wagons West except that southern part of the United States. And so it was a chance for me to get to go back there and take that trip across the southern part of the United States. And
I bet the reactions from people.
Yeah,
I bet that was. Tell us a little about some reactions.
Yeah, the main reaction I will tell you is that any place you show up with a trolley, the town thinks they're getting a trolley, right? And they're very disappointed when they find out that they don't. So, I'll tell you some stories about Tupelo, Mississippi, and Russellville, Arkansas, and Flagstaff, Arizona. But pretty much anywhere you go with the trolley. But yeah, it's cool. You're getting looks, right? Like you look out the window and there's people filming you, as you're going by, and you're definitely getting noticed, and everybody wants to talk to you about it. So I got to meet so many people because there was, people wanted to talk about it. In fact, there was this one family that was traveling across the country, and we met up at Winslow, Arizona, and Grand Petrified Forest National Park, at the Meteor Crater. So we filmed a little segment with them for my social media because we kept meeting up with each other. So when we come back,
they were following you. Yeah, you had some groupies.
I don't know if we were following them. We were just kind of going in the same direction. So when we come back from the commercial break, I'm going to get into the trip and just tell you about some of the things we saw and some of the people we met and some of the experiences I had. This is the Marc McMain Show on Real Country 92.3. Bob Furr filling in for Mark. We'll be right back after a few short commercial messages.
I've got to tell you about the best kept secret in Monroe for electric wholesale supply, Allen's Electric. Family owned and operated since 1972, Allen's Electric offers a complete line of electrical supply, wiring, breakers, bulbs, heating elements, electric motors, light fixtures, and so much more. Located at 925 West Spring Street in Monroe, stop by and see Brian and Cindy, in business for over 50 years. That's Allen Electric Supply, 770-267-5572.
Cassie Enterprises invites you to stop in and see their new line of Coyote brand tractors, UTVs, and Bad Boy zero-turn mowers. Coyote tractors have the power to handle any job. Working on the farm, landscape business, and more, Coyote tractors are dependable and ready to work for you. Sales, service, parts, and more. It's all available at Cassie Enterprises. Family owned and operated. 145 Highway 83 in Good Hope. Go to CassieTractor.com. Roll-Off Systems of Statham, they're on a roll. They offer dumpsters in all sizes, trash compactors, porta potties, and new combo cans. Existing sites are new building sites. Trash and waste disposal, it's their business. Locally owned and operated. Call Roll-Off Systems today. 770-725-ROLL. That's 770-725-ROLL. Or go to rolloffsystems.com.
The Madison Trolley Company is Morgan County's newest 5-star attraction. We offer historic Madison tours year-round, a haunted history experience in the fall, and our Madison Lights Christmas Tour and Mary Maddie Express Adventure for kids have become new holiday traditions. Our private charters add vintage charm to weddings and special occasions aboard a historic trolley by day, party trolley by night. Find us on the Madison Town Square or get on board by visiting MadisonTrolley.com or calling us at 706-997-1800.
And welcome back to the Marc McMain Show. Bob Furr filling in for Marc on Tuesdays here on Real Country 92.3, and we are talking about driving a trolley across the United States. Now, I got to say, Chastity, before the trip even started, I was picking it up in a place called Santa Ana, California, which is in Southern California, and it's right next to a place that I've been waiting to make a pilgrimage my entire life, and that's because from 1972 to 1977, if you were looking for me on a Saturday night at 8 p.m., I was in front of the TV watching a show called Emergency. And Emergency was a really interesting show because it introduced the world to this concept of paramedics in the fire service responding to medical emergencies, which was a completely new concept. Ambulances were started by funeral homes. And basically, they just used their hearses because you had a way for somebody to lie down in the back. They just made a bed that they could put in a cot, And then eventually the hearses bought ambulances that looked like ambulances, but nobody was doing any medical care. They're just putting you in an ambulance and taking you to the hospital. And so it was just transportation. Emergency introduced America to this concept of delivering medical care in the field, basically bringing the hospital to the patient. And it inspired a generation of first responders, me included. In fact, later on in my life, I played a big role in my home county in getting the fire department to start to run medicals. I mean, you had you're waiting 45 minutes for an ambulance, kind of the situation we have here in Morgan County. You get 45 minutes for an ambulance, and the fire trucks, you're driving right by the fire trucks, and so we started to get the fire departments to run some medicals, and then advancing the level of care to advanced emergency medical technicians, defibrillation and stuff with the volunteer ambulance. And so that show was really a big thing in my childhood. And I remember when I was older, after college, I went on a trip to Yosemite National Park, and I'm driving around in the tram, and we go by the fire station, and Engine 51 from the show is sitting in there in the fire station. And we're like, wait, what? And apparently that fire truck had been sold from Universal Studios to Yosemite, and it was now working, as a fire truck there. And so I always wanted to go back to the station where they filmed it, and then Engine 51 and Squad 51, which were the two main units, ended up at the LA County Fire Museum. Anyway, these were both right next to where I got the trolley. So I went to the fire station first, and I expected to find, it looked like the fire station on the outside, but everything inside was going to be modern. Not the case at all. They have left it completely intact. So the map that was on the show is still on the wall. The office, the bunk rooms, the lockers. They even have Johnny Gage, one of the main characters, clothing hanging in the locker. And I walk in, I'm like, hey, I'm one of those goober firefighters that's coming back. And I had my Madison Fire Department shirt on. I just joined the fire department here in Madison, so I had my Madison Fire Department shirt on. And the guy's like, oh, no, come on, I'll take you for a tour. And he's a young guy. Like, his parents probably weren't born when this show was on. But I'm like, oh, so this isn't unusual? He's like, no, about every other shift, every 2 shifts, we get people coming like you that want to do it. And they have a whole tour worked out. And they take you around this fire station that they've kept intact of just what it looked like. They got all kinds of memorabilia and everything on the wall. And they show you all this different stuff. And, I mean, it looks like you're on a TV set, for me anyway. And then the best part is you exit through the gift shop. He opens this locker. And I was really happy that I bought like $100 worth of stuff because you open it up, they got T-shirts and all the rest of it. And all the money goes to the firefighters. And I'm like, well, what do you guys do with the money? And he's like, look at this. And they had this beautiful gym and workout facility in the back of the bay of the engine. So it was really cool. So that was a nice surprise. And then I went to the museum, and really cool museum, bunch of old like steam fire trucks and hook and ladders, things dating back to 1810, 1820. And then there's, Engine 51 and Squad 51 sitting right there. So that was a big moment for me to get to go there. And then after I did that, then we start the drive, right? So I got to head out of California into Barstow, long climb up into the mountains, really having to watch those RPMs fighting the traffic. But as I got clear of the traffic, and especially as I got into Arizona, I'm driving along the old Route 66. And that's when I really started to realize, man, this is a great way to see America, because I'm probably 10 feet off the ground, and I've got 180 degrees of windows in front of me. And so my head was just on a swivel looking from one thing to the other. And a lot of the times it's like, it's a place in that part of the country where nothing is something, right? Absolutely. Then there's all kinds of roadside attractions. Like there was one junkyard I saw along Route 66. There had to be 300 cars that were all from the 1920s, 1930s, just sitting out there, that had obviously been collected from Route 66 over the years. Incredible geological features, and those features and the topography and the climate is like changing. So like, for example, Arizona, we think of the Grand Canyon and the desert. Well, my first part of Arizona was the mountains. Like I'm going through forest, like there's a dead elk on the side of the road, like an elk had gotten hit. How much damage do you think that does to your car? So and then there was this one moment in Texas, it was like out of a TV show, a tumbleweed goes rolling across the ground and a coyote is chasing after it. I'm like, I feel like it. Wow. And it was just interesting, like bear crossing sign, elk crossing sign, and all that, all kinds of wildlife and that. And it's just constantly always changing. And it was just cool to be driving along Route 66.
It'd be like a safari kind of.
Yeah, it was just, I mean, the first thought I had was how many people are driving across the country with their kids, and their kids are in the back seat with their heads down into a tablet or a phone, and all this beauty is going by them, and they're missing it. I'll tell you, the other thing that struck me out there was trains. Like, we think we have trains. I mean, I'm talking trains that went on, like 5 engines pulling it. Then halfway through the train, they had another 5 engines in the middle, and at the back of the train, another 5 engines. Right. And we're talking trains that were easily 10 miles long. I don't know, maybe that's not, but a lot, miles long. And one after the other. Like there was like one train after the other. It gave you a sense for just things to think about, the mass of goods that were moving across this country and producing in this country. It really kind of made that sink in. You're listening to Marc McMain Show here on Real Country 92.3. Bob Furr filling in for Mark, talking about driving a trolley across the United States. And so the other thing I would say is just the changing topography and climate. So, for example, going from those North Arizona mountains where you could literally smell the forest around you down into the desert, where now all of a sudden it's just absolutely nothing. Tumbleweeds and
coyotes
dust and no water. Like you notice there's no water. There's all these stream beds that are called washes that have no water in them because it's when it rains there's flash floods, and but other than that, that's it. And it's interesting because you'll see some greenery in them. There's like just enough water to adapt that.
Dust storms.
We'll get to dust storms in Texas.
So interesting.
So I made 3 stops in Arizona that were really interesting. The first one was the Meteor Crater Natural Landmark, which is right off of I-40. And so basically this is in the Painted Desert. of Arizona, which was once a lush tropical rainforest, but now it's a flat desert, one of those places where nothing is something, right? And a meteor, a nickel and iron meteor that was about 150 feet across, came down and impacted the earth here in this part of Arizona. Now, to give you a sense for this was really interesting. They have one piece. The meteor mostly disintegrated, but they have one piece of it that's about 3 feet long, 2 feet wide, and about a foot high, right? So not that big, right? It weighs over 1,400 pounds because of the density of the iron and the nickel in it. The impact it came in at 26,000 miles an hour. I don't know how they figured it out, but they figured that stuff out. I won't get into when it happened. Million years, 50 years, 60 years. Sure. I'm not getting into that debate. It happened a long time ago.
Right.
All right, it happened a long time ago. It hit doing 26,000 miles an hour, created a blast that was 150 times the force of the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima, lifted 175 million tons of earth up into the air, and left this giant crater that sits there today. It's 3/4 of a mile across, so almost a full mile across. It's just under 600 feet deep, and then the rim that it was created when the meteor hit sits about 160 feet off the plains. So to give you some size perspective about that, you can put 20 football stadiums with seating for 2 million people in that base. The entire downtown area of San Francisco would sit in the base of this thing, and it's the best preserved impact crater in the world because of where it sits in the desert. There's not much rain, erosion, and all that sort of thing. So it's an impressive site. It was one of the places I'd never been to before, and I'm really glad that I got to go there and take a look at that. It was interesting. It's privately owned. A guy named Barringer back in 1903 staked a claim to the land, which would have been before Arizona was a state. I think Arizona became a state in 1959, if I'm not mistaken. I probably am mistaken, but it was one of the last states. I think it was the last state, in fact, before Alaska and Hawaii. And so this is when it's still a territory. He stakes the claim, and his family's owned it ever since. So I thought it was a national park. It's not. It's a privately run operation, but it's run well. And they have some cool films, and they explain it to you, and they'll take you up on the crater. However, I didn't get to take the crater tour because the 65-mile-an-hour winds, wouldn't do the tour. But they did let you go up there on your own. I'm like, wouldn't it be smarter if I went on the tour with the guide? So, but it was unbelievable being up there in that wind. And they just started letting you go down into the crater again. They take lead hikes down in there. They stopped because there was a movie in the 70s or 80s called Starman. Jeff Bridges was in it, and Karen Allen, I think, might have been in it with her. And he basically is an alien that ends up here on Earth, and they filmed it there. And I guess the film crew carved their names and everything all over the old mining equipment because the guy had a mine in the bottom of it. He was looking for the crater. He spent his whole life looking for not the crater, the meteor, his whole life. So really, really kind of cool. So that's where I first met this family that I would encounter several times along the way. And then from there, I started to head across the state, and that's when I came to the second location, which was the Petrified Forest National Park. Now, that I had been to as a kid before on Wagons West, but we didn't get to the whole park. That was an amazing place. So first of all, it was once a lush tropical rainforest. All of Arizona was once a lush tropical rainforest. And now it is just the most barren desert that you can imagine. But it has these trees, and they're big trees, were covered in sediment and then became crystallized. And so they're like now trees made of stone. And so there's all these blocks of trees that are lying on the ground, either cut up or broken up, that are crystallized. They look like you're looking at a rock or a piece of crystal, all these forests. And then the rest of the topography is just absolutely amazing. Like it looks a lot like the Badlands in some areas. Probably 16 different types of geological formations, and then this vast overlook. There's so Route 66 used to run through the park. It was the only national park that 66 ran through. They've got that route marked out with the old telephone pole still standing through the park and a little monument. They got a little Studebaker sitting there. And then there's this sandstone inn that overlooks this beautiful valley. And it's completely as it was back in the Route 66 days with a soda fountain and all the rest of it. So, definitely if you're traveling in that part of country, Petrified Forest National Park is definitely something that you want to see. And so the last thing in Arizona before we jump to a commercial break is I'm driving along 66. I had to get a picture of Dolly on 66 because I'm making this social media posts every day, on our progress, and I come to Route 66 and it's Winslow, Arizona. Mm-hmm. I'm like standing on the corner in Winslow, Arizona. So sure enough, I pulled up and I got the trolley parked behind the flatbed Ford. So I was able to do a post and what do you know? There's Dolly standing on a corner in Winslow, Arizona. Such a fine sight to see.
I love that.
So that was the end of the Arizona trip, and then from there I moved, from Arizona into New Mexico, and another great change, right? So here's where it's still kind of deserty, but it becomes more mountainous. Now you're starting to see more vegetation and the white rock replacing. So there's a big change, almost like as you drive across the border between the topography of Arizona and New Mexico. Mm-hmm. You're listening to the Marc McMain Show. Bob Furr filling in for Mark here on Tuesdays, talking about driving a trolley across the country. We'll talk more about that when we get back from these commercial breaks.
It's family fun every Saturday night at the Winder Barrel Speedway in Winder. Gates open at 4 p.m. and the green flag drops at 7 p.m. Don't miss the excitement of the greatest show on dirt as drivers buckle up, get door to door, and bumper to bumper that take that checkered flag. It's the Winder Barrel Speedway, 330 Donahue Road in Winder. Call 770-867-6327 or go to winderbarrelspeedway.com. It's the place to be on Saturday night.
Don't miss the Happy Together 2026 tour on Saturday, May 30th at 7 p.m. at the Georgia Mountain Fairgrounds in Hiawassee, Georgia, featuring the Association, the Trogs, Chicago lead singer Jason Sheff, Gary Puckett, Ron Dante from the Archies and the Turtles, the Vogues, the Cowsills, and more. It's the Happy Together tour on Friday, May 30th at the Georgia Mountain Fairgrounds in Hiawassee. For more information, go to GeorgiaMountainFairgrounds.com. Brought to you by the Towns County Convention and Visitors Bureau. The Madison Trolley Company is Morgan County's newest 5-star attraction. We offer historic Madison tours year-round, a haunted history experience in the fall, and our Madison Lights Christmas Tour and Mary Maddie Express Adventure for kids have become new holiday traditions. Our private charters add vintage charm to weddings and special occasions aboard a historic trolley by day, party trolley by night. Find us on the Madison Town Square or get on board by visiting MadisonTrolley.com or calling us at 706-997-1800.
All right, welcome back to the Marc McMain Show here on Real Country 92.3 on your FM dial. Bob Furr filling in for Mark, talking about driving a trolley across the United States. So now we're getting into New Mexico, beautiful country, lots of sandstone formations. And this is when you really start to feel the Native American influence, right? You're really starting to see that. A lot of roadside attractions from the old days of Route 66. And then more mountains, and I finally make it to Albuquerque, New Mexico, and spend the night in Albuquerque. Get up the next morning, and now this is going to be Albuquerque going from Albuquerque, New Mexico, down into the Great Plains and across the Texas Panhandle. Now, as I went from New Mexico into the Texas Panhandle, there was something kind of amusing. As I'm driving out of New Mexico, there are all these signs because marijuana is legal in New Mexico. And so there are all these signs, dispensary coming up, last dispensary in New Mexico. So all these billboards are talking about going to these dispensaries to buy weed. You cross over into the Texas Panhandle where marijuana is not legal in Texas, and all the billboards are now, hey, welcome. They have a picture of a bag of marijuana gummy bears. It's welcome to Texas. Now you're a felon, and it's all law firms that are lining this. So it was just funny to go from, and in Oklahoma it's legal as well. Okay. So they were on the other. So you have this panhandle of Texas sticking up between these two seats that have legalized marijuana, and lining the road are all these lawyers saying, hey, when you get pulled over with that weed you got bought in New Mexico, give me a call. So that's kind of struck.
That's all.
Right, that struck me as easy. Now, listen, I can't speak to the culture and the people of the Texas Panhandle, but apologies to the Texas Panhandle. I've been to all 50 states, and based on the topography and the climate, I think it might be the least desirable place that I would want to live in the entire United States. Before I went on the trip, I watched a documentary about the Dust Bowl that happened during the Depression.
Okay.
And man, do I get it after going through the Panhandle. It was 40 to 60 mile an hour winds, and there's no trees or anything. You're like right out there on a flat surface. There's nothing for as far as you can see. And I'm driving a shoebox on wheels, by the way, in through this thing. And there's no ground cover on the ground. It's all like been plowed over, and just like what caused the Dust Bowl. And so I'm in the middle of a dust storm. I mean, it is tan. The sky is tan in all directions, and you can see the dust blowing. And so I drove through a bona fide dust storm going through there. And the only thing that kept me going through the Texas Panhandle were the billboards for Buc-ee's in Amarillo. I was like, if I could get to that sliced turkey sandwich at Buc-ee's, that was you have to have goals on a trip like this. And
absolutely.
And that was a big goal for me. And so that was my goal, was Amarillo by lunchtime. And then I started, of course, cattle country, right? You're just seeing massive herds of cattle and cowboys out there. It was kind of cool to see. I mean, these guys aren't wearing the cowboy hat to the country music concert, right? These guys are cowboys and moving the horses around, just massive stockyards as you move through cattle country. And that kind of continues into Oklahoma, but then topography starts to change, and now for the first time I'm seeing water. Like, oh my gosh, a river. It was a moment when I saw a river. Like, when was the last time I saw a river? Like, when was the last time I saw a river? And now you start to see it starts to become farm country, and it starts to come into that way. It also becomes thunderstorm country. So this is the part of the trip now where I'm starting to have to keep watching the weather app to either get ahead of or come back, stay behind violent thunderstorms that are going through the state. And it was during one of these thunderstorms that I had a great moment. Throughout the trip, I was listening to Real Country 92.3 on the radio because it was perfect. I'm in real country, right? I am in real country. I want to listen to old country music. As God is my witness, I'm crossing through Oklahoma in like the most Oklahoman looking part of Oklahoma, and on comes "You're the Reason God Made Oklahoma."
Wow.
It was. I had to
Perfect
stop.
timing.
It was like a moment. I had to stop and enjoy that moment. And the other cool thing is for dodging thunderstorms is Dolly's got a back deck. So if I had to stop, I'd just pull in someplace and I'd just hang out at the back deck and grab a nice tea, a little something to eat, and sit out there. I should have brought a chair. That would have been a good thing to have thought of next time. Next time I drive a trolley across the country, I'll do that.
So is that the going through Oklahoma? Was there something that kind of emotionally
Yeah, well, the thing for me, I spent the night in Oklahoma City because the next morning I wanted to go to the Oklahoma City Bombing Memorial. And I knew that I was going to go there, so I'd watched. I remember it, of course. I remember when it unfolded, but I wanted to refresh my memory. And that was one of the finest museums and memorials I've ever been to. It was so well done. The way they tell you the story, like I don't want to say too much because the way the story unfolds. But I will say your experience starts. You're in a water hearing across the street. And it reminded me, I go to all these city council meetings in Madison, like just the procedure. Here's what's going to happen. Like it's this very procedural thing. And then kaboom, And the way they tell the story and all the different aspects of the story, like the two things that stood out to me the most was there's one room where you're looking at artifacts, like somebody's mug, eyeglasses, shoes, that very makes it personal. And while you're seeing them, you're listening to the radio traffic between the first responders, responding and dealing with the disaster. But the thing that struck me the most was this one little plaque, and it said, they put out a call. From that bombing was created something called the Oklahoma Standard, which basically means the standard of coming to each other's aid. And it was like a fraternity opened a blood bank, and an hour later was on the radio saying, "Please don't come, we can't, we're overwhelmed." Like there was so much. Anyway, they put out a call for protective clothing because the night of the bombing, while people are still trapped into the building, a violent thunderstorm came through, and they put out a call for protective clothing, gloves, work boots, and all that. And some guy showed up and handed off a pair of slightly used work boots. And it wasn't until the guy was walking back to his car that the volunteer who took the boots saw that he was in his stocking feet. He had literally taken the boots off his feet. to deliver.
Awesome.
So very moving,
Yes.
people going about their day. I would compare it closest thing to the 9/11 memorial in New York City. I would say somehow that's maybe just so big and overwhelming, but highly, highly recommend. And they did a beautiful job with the memorial, with where the building's footprint was, with the chairs, and all the rest of it. So that was the most emotional moment of the trip for sure. Was getting to see that Oklahoma City Memorial Museum. So highly recommend a visit to that. Now I'm continuing on my way. You're listening to Real Country 92.3, the Marc McMain Show. Bob Furr filling in for Mark on Tuesdays, talking about driving a trolley across the country. So now this is my best small town experience. I'm driving through Arkansas now, and I see a sign for Ridgewood Brothers Barbecue. And my barbecue spidey sense told me I need to go there. And so I pull in, and I park in a parking lot across the street from the barbecue. And I'm watching this couple walking in, and the guy is looking at me the whole way, and he's standing in the doorway of the barbecue place, and he's talking to somebody inside. And as I get closer, he says, "I'm just going to ask him," And so the guy turns around. So I tell him the story. I go in. The mayor is in there. 2 members of the city council. Basically, the entire town of Russellville is having barbecue at Ridgewood's, which was off the charts, by the way. Fantastic,
sounds good.
best cream corn I ever had. But it was hard to eat it because I'm like, Dolly is a conversation stopper, and everybody keeps coming in to the mayor. Mayor, we got a trolley? No, it's not. You're just passing through. So I bought a T-shirt, did a little social media post with them. That was pretty cool. And then from there, just started heading into it and, crossed the Mississippi. That was a big moment to cross the Mississippi River. And then, went through a bunch of states. It was very quickly Oklahoma, Arkansas, Tennessee, and then into Mississippi. Stayed in a small town in Holly Springs, Mississippi, and now it's the home stretch. Right now, I'm ready to get home. But I see on my map Tupelo, Mississippi, which is of course the birthplace of Elvis Presley. And I'm like, at first I'm just going to drive through. I'm like, at this point I'm kind of ready to get home. I'm not really seeing anything new, but I'm like, no. And I look at the weather, and I'm like, okay, I got a storm I got to wait out. So I go to the birthplace of Elvis Presley. What a pleasant surprise! So much more than I expected to be. I like Elvis. I wouldn't call myself an Elvis fan. I was kind of laughing at the Elvis fans that were there visiting, and then I remembered my trip to the emergency fire station, so I shut up about that. But I went there because he's an historic figure, and that's what I learned. Like, I learned what life was like in the South in the Depression era, how people lived, the big migration to cities as a result of the Depression. And one of the most interesting things was they had an awesome recreation. You go into his original church, and the screens come down on the side and in the front, and you are in the middle of a Pentecostal church service in Tupelo, Mississippi in 1940, and Elvis gets up when he's a little kid and sings, and you can see from the preacher, the way the preacher was walking around with the guitar. It was a great experience to see. I didn't understand how much of a historic impact he had on the world of music and popular culture and the world. The whole story of him going into the military in the middle of his career and spending time, being overseas in the military. It was just a really interesting, really great experience. Yes. So really highly recommend that as well. And then I stopped at Johnny's, which was a place that he used to like to get a cheeseburger and an RC Cola. I got the cheeseburger. I went for an unsweet tea instead of the RC Cola, and then had to explain to another group of people that no, Tupelo, Mississippi is not getting a trolley. This one's going.
Was it like old-fashioned burgers?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It was great. It was, and they have the bench. Like, here's the bench where Elvis sat, and all that sort of thing. Like, apparently he was a regular there. The woman in the place that the church, like, she said, "Let me tell you all the places are to see out to Elvis." I mean, it was. I recorded it on hiding my phone for my wife to hear, because I'm like, it was classic. So you couldn't make it up. So so then now it's coming to an end, right? I get to I-20 and I'm going through Alabama, and now it's kind of familiar territory, and it's a lot of mixed feelings because I'm in the home stretch, and honestly, 5 days driving a trolley is probably the right number of days. It was still fun. I don't know that it would have been fun day 6, and I was ready to be home, ready to see my family. I'm not really seeing anything new. I will say what was really cool was it was also kind of the hardest part of the trip because I'm not seeing anything. It's just like make the miles. But there was a great view coming from Alabama down out of the mountains and seeing Atlanta in the distance, and just realizing how by far Atlanta was the biggest city, that I'd seen on the trip. And then it was I-20. I rolled into Madison about 10:30 p.m. And got the trolley back here. And that was kind of an interesting story. Madison is so I had been making these social media posts along the way on Facebook and Instagram, kind of chronicling the story. But I started late. They were running 2 or 3 days behind. One, because I didn't have necessarily the time to get them done while I was driving, and secondly, because security. Right? I didn't need to advertise to the world that I was, my family was home alone, and I'm out in Oklahoma. And so, but when I get to Madison, I walk into Madison Produce for lunch, and people are like, "Aren't you in Oklahoma?" I'm like, it's a little bit of a taste. And then people were putting comments on, "Didn't I see you in Madison today?" I'm like, it's a little bit of a tape delay. But Dolly's back. She's going to be Unit 2 in the fleet. We're going to be seeing about getting her painted and fixed up and getting ready, and she'll be our trolley for weddings. And so Madison Trolley Company has done it. But I will say, I'll close on this. I'll just say, I've been to all 50 states. I was blessed growing up traveling the country on that Wagons West Camp tour. Here's my advice. Go see the country and see it from a car window, not from an airplane window, especially if you have kids anywhere from 10 to teenagers. A lot of kids just graduated high school. Great opportunity for you to do something with them. Make them put down the phones. Make them put down the iPad. Yes. Make them put down the screens and look out the window. And don't stay at hotels. Camp or get an RV. Every hotel is the same. I don't care where you are. My hotel in Oklahoma City was just like my hotel in Albuquerque. Campgrounds are different. And when you camp in an RV park or a campground, you feel like you're in the place that you're in. And seeing America helps you see America differently. And so I can't recommend enough, if you have the opportunity, to take your family, travel the country, see as much of it as you can, and really see it. This has been the Marc McMain Show. Bob Furr filling in for Marc on Tuesdays. Looks like for the foreseeable future. We'll talk to you next Tuesday. Until then, keep it real, country.